July 12, 1943, 8:30 a.m. Prokhorovka, near Kursk, Soviet Union. The ground trembled, not from artillery, not from bombs falling from the sky, from steel. Thousands of tons of it, rolling across the open steppe in columns so long they seemed endless. Dust clouds rose like smoke signals. The air smelled of diesel, gunpowder, and scorched earth. Through the haze, two sounds emerged: low, grinding diesel engines from the east, and the deeper, thunderous roar of Maybach motors from the west. Over 800 tanks were about to collide in a single day. It would become the largest armored engagement in human history. And at the center of it all, two machines, two philosophies, two nations betting everything on a different vision of war. On one side, the Tiger I, Germany's 57-ton steel fortress, thick armor, precise engineering, a gun so powerful it could punch through enemy tanks from over 2 kilometers away. On the other, the T-34, the Soviet Union's mass-produced workhorse, lighter, faster, simpler, built not for perfection, but for survival. Here's the question that still haunts military historians today. Would you rather have one nearly indestructible tank, or 10 that keep coming no matter how many you destroy? Let me know in the comments. Because what happened at Kursk wasn't just a battle. It was a test, a brutal, fiery experiment that would decide the future of armored warfare for the next 80 years. Two machines, two philosophies. To understand what happened at Kursk, you have to understand what these tanks represented. The Tiger. I wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. Weighing 57 tons, covered in armor up to 120 mm thick on the front, it was practically invincible to most Soviet anti-tank guns. Its 88 mm Kyuk-36 gun, originally designed as an anti-aircraft weapon, could destroy enemy armor at ranges most tanks couldn't even see. Inside, it was a marvel of German engineering, precision optics, advanced targeting systems, a crew trained for months to operate it like a surgical instrument. When a Tiger appeared on the battlefield, Soviet tank crews felt it. The psychological impact alone was devastating. Reports from the Eastern Front describe entire Soviet formations hesitating, even retreating, at the sight of a single Tiger. But there was a problem. Tigers were expensive, brutally so. Each one cost roughly 300,000 Reichsmarks, about $8 million in today's money. They were slow to produce. Germany built around 1,300 Tigers during the entire war. They were mechanically complex. Breakdowns were common. Spare parts were scarce. A Tiger stuck in mud or with a broken transmission was just a very expensive pillbox. And most critically, there simply weren't enough of them. Enter the T-34. The T-34 was the opposite in almost every way. It wasn't the most powerful tank. It wasn't the most comfortable. Soviet crews joked that it was louder inside than outside, but it had something the Tiger didn't. Numbers. The chassis. Soviet Union built over 84,000 T-34s during the war. 84,000. And it had something else too. Speed. The T-34 could reach 53 km/h on roads, faster than almost any German tank. Sloped armor. Instead of thick, flat plates like the Tiger, the T-34 used sloped armor that deflected shells instead of absorbing them. A 45 mm plate angled at 60 degrees was as effective as 90 mm of flat armor. Simplicity. The T-34 was designed to be built by workers with minimal training in factories that had been relocated thousands of kilometers east to escape German advances. It was designed to be repaired in the field with a hammer and a wrench. Reliability. Its wide tracks distributed weight across soft ground, mud, snow, sand. It could go places the Tiger couldn't even attempt. And perhaps most importantly, it was designed with a brutal pragmatism. Soviet tank doctrine didn't expect a T-34 to survive long. The average lifespan of a Soviet tank crew in 1943 was measured in weeks, sometimes days. But if you lose one T-34, you send 2 more. If you lose 10, you send 20, because the factories in the Urals were running 24 hours a day. And the Germans, they couldn't replace their losses. Kursk. The collision. By July 1943, the war had turned. Germany's lightning advances of 1941 and 1942 had stalled. The disaster at Stalingrad had shattered the myth of invincibility. Hitler needed a victory, something dramatic, something that would show the world, and his own people, that Germany could still win. Operation Citadel was the answer. A massive pincer movement aimed at the Kursk salient, a bulge in the Soviet lines. Trap the Red Army, destroy them, regain the initiative. And leading the charge would be Germany's newest, most powerful armored units, including hundreds of Tigers and the even heavier Ferdinand tank destroyers. But the Soviets knew it was coming. Soviet intelligence had intercepted German plans. They knew the date. They knew the location. They knew the objective. So they dug in. They laid minefields, built anti-tank ditches, positioned artillery, and they massed tanks, thousands of them, in reserve, waiting. When the Germans attacked on July 5th, they ran straight into the most heavily defended position in military history. And for a week, the battle raged. July 12th, Prokhorovka. By July 12th, the German advance had penetrated deep into Soviet defenses, but at brutal cost. The Tiger tanks were doing exactly what they were designed to do. One Tiger reportedly engaged and stopped 50 Soviet tanks single-handedly. Another claimed 10 confirmed hits in a single engagement. But they were still advancing, still burning fuel, still taking hits that didn't penetrate but damaged optics, tracks, hatches. And the T-34s kept coming. At Prokhorovka, Soviet commander Pavel Rotmistrov made a decision that would define the battle. Instead of engaging the Tigers at range, where the German guns had every advantage, he ordered a full-speed charge, hundreds of T-34s racing at top speed directly toward the German lines. The goal wasn't to win a gunnery duel. It was to close the distance. Get so close that the Tigers' gun advantage disappeared. Get close enough that the T-34's speed and maneuverability mattered more than armor thickness. It was chaos. Tanks colliding. Turrets traversing wildly trying to track targets moving at 50 km/h just meters away. Smoke and dust so thick that visibility dropped to nearly zero. German gun crews found themselves unable to depress their guns low enough to hit T-34s that had closed to point-blank range. Soviet tanks that were hit kept rolling forward, sometimes crewless, sometimes still firing. Tigers that had dominated at 2,000 meters found themselves overwhelmed at 200. The mathematics of attrition. Here's the brutal arithmetic of Kursk. A Tiger could destroy 5, 10, even 15 T-34s before being stopped. But if 20 T-34s attacked, the math didn't favor the Tiger. The Germans couldn't afford to trade one Tiger for 10 T-34s. But the Soviets could afford to trade 10 T-34s for one Tiger, because tomorrow 10 more T-34s would arrive from the factories in the Urals. But the Tiger, it might take months to replace, if ever. This wasn't just a battle, it was an equation, and the Soviets had done the math. The breakdown. By mid-July, something else started happening. Tigers began breaking down. Transmissions failed under the strain of constant movement. Engines overheated. Tracks broke. German repair crews worked frantically. But spare parts had to come from Germany, over 1,000 kilometers away through partisan-infested territory. Disabled Tigers had to be abandoned or destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. Meanwhile, T-34s that broke down were often repaired on the spot. Engines swapped, tracks replaced. Back in action within hours. One Soviet unit reported cannibalizing 3 damaged T-34s to build 2 functional ones in less than a day. Try doing that with a Tiger. The turning point. By July 17th, Operation Citadel was called off. It wasn't because the Germans had been pushed back. In many places, they still held their positions. It was because they couldn't continue. The losses were unsustainable. Over 200 German tanks gone. Irreplaceable crews lost. Fuel reserves exhausted. The Soviets had lost far more tanks, possibly 3 times as many. But they could afford it. The factories were still running. The crews were still training. The tanks were still coming. Germany couldn't win a war of attrition. And Kursk proved it. 2 philosophies. 1 lesson, the Tiger. I was a masterpiece of engineering. Individually, it was superior to the T-34 in almost every measurable way. Better armor, better gun, better optics, better crew comfort. But war isn't fought by individual tanks. It's fought by armies, by logistics, by industrial capacity, by the ability to replace what you lose faster than the enemy can destroy it. The Tiger represented the German belief that quality could overcome quantity, that superior engineering and training could compensate for numerical disadvantage. The T-34 represented the Soviet understanding that war is attrition, that simplicity, speed, and mass production win wars. 1 Tiger might defeat 10 T-34s, but the 11th would keep coming, and the 12th, and the 13th, until there were no more Tigers left. The legacy. After Kursk, Germany never launched another major offensive on the Eastern Front. The strategic initiative had shifted, permanently. The T-34 went on to become the most produced tank in history. It fought in dozens of conflicts across 6 continents. Some are still in service today, 80 years later. The Tiger became a legend, but legends don't win wars. Production stopped in 1944. The few that survived the war ended up in museums. Modern tank design reflects the lessons of Kursk. Tanks today balance firepower, protection, and mobility, but they prioritize reliability and producibility. Because the most dangerous tank isn't the one with the thickest armor, it's the one that shows up. Again, and again, and again. Closing. The tank that kept coming. There's a Soviet veteran's account from Kursk that stays with me. He described watching a Tiger destroy his entire platoon. 5 T-34s gone in less than 3 minutes. He was the only survivor. He said he sat in the wreckage, waiting for the Tiger to finish him. But then he heard it. Engines. Dozens of them. Another wave of T-34s cresting the hill behind him. The Tiger turned, fired, hit one, then another. But they kept coming. And eventually the Tiger's crew, low on ammunition, surrounded, abandoned their machine and retreated on foot. The veteran said he climbed into one of the newly arrived T-34s and kept fighting. That, he said, was the moment he understood they were going to win the war. Not because they had better tanks, but because they had more of them. And no matter how many were lost, there would always be one more. That's the legacy of Kursk. Not the individual brilliance of the Tiger, but the relentless, unstoppable tide of the T-34, the tank that kept coming.